Adi Lila 10, text 113. Word by word in translation. Ramadasa. Kavichandra. Sri Gopala Dasa. What do you think that one is? Bhagavata Acharya. Thakur Sarangadasa. So today, Madhuri, appearance or disappearance? Sorry, I don't have a calendar. Huh?
I don't remember. Disappearance.
Okay. So it is the disappearance of this glorious associate of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Thakur Saranga Dasa. Ramadasa Kavichandra Sigopala Dasa. Ramadasa Kavichandra Sigopala Dasa. Ramadasa Kavichandra Sigopala Dasa. Bhagavatacharya Thakur Saranga Dasa. Bhagavatacharya Thakur Saranga Dasa. Bhagavatacharya Thakur Saranga Dasa. So just a couple of you, one of the men, you chant, and then one of the ladies, and we'll move along here because it's a little behind time. You chant.
Ramadasa Kavichandra Sri Gopala Dasa.
Ramadasa Kavichandra Sri Gopala Dasa.
Bhagavatacharya Thakur Saranga Dasa.
Bhagavatacharya Thakur Saranga Dasa. Ladies, one of you.
Ramadasa Kavichandra Sri Gopala Dasa.
Ramadasa Kavichandra Sri Gopala Dasa.
Bhagavatacharya Thakur Saranga Dasa.
Bhagavatacharya Thakur Saranga Dasa. So the translation and purport by His Divine Grace. The 73rd branch of the original tree was Ramadasa. The 74th was Kavichandra. The 75th was Sri Gopala Dasa. The 76th was Bhagavata Acharya. And the 77th was Thakur Saranga Das. So the title of this particular chapter 10 is The Branches of the Chaitanya Tree. And I forget which verse it is, sorry about that, but Prabhupada does mention somewhere in one of these verses that Iskcon is also a branch of Lord Chaitanya's tree. So for those who like to bash Iskcon, just keep that in mind. You're bashing Lord Chaitanya's tree. Not a good plan. So the purport. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Thakur writes in his Anubhashya, in the Gauragadesha Dipika 203, it is said, Bhagavata Acharya compiled a book entitled Krishna Prema Taringani, and he was the most beloved devotee of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Now you might have heard other statements, or such and such a person was also the most, but that just shows what a magnanimous heart Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has. That he can, his heart is unlimited. So there can be many, many unlimited most favorites. When Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu visited Varaha Nagara now a suburb of Calcutta. He stayed in the house of a most fortunate Brahmana who was a very learned scholar in Bhagavata literature. As soon as this Brahmana saw Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he began to read Srimad Bhagavatam. When Mahaprabhu heard his explanations, which expounded Bhakti Yoga, he immediately became unconscious in ecstasy. Lord Chaitanya later said, "I have never heard such a nice explanation of Srimad Bhagavatam. I therefore designate you Bhagavata Acharya. Your only duty is to recite Srimad Bhagavatam. This is my injunction." His real name was Raghunath. His monastery, which is situated in the Varaha Nagara, about 3.5 miles north of Calcutta on the bank of the Ganga, still exists, and it's managed by the initiated disciples of the late Sri Ramdas Babaji. Presently, however, it is not as well managed as in the presence of Babaji Maharaj. Another name of Thakura Sarangadas was Saranga Thakur. Sometimes he was also called Sarangapani or Sarangadara. He was a resident of Navadvip in the neighborhood known as Modrumadvip, and he used to worship the Supreme Lord in a secluded place on the bank of the Ganges. He was not accepting disciples, but he was repeatedly being inspired from within by the Supreme Personality of Godhead to do so. Thus one morning he decided, "Whomever I see, I shall make my disciple." How many people know this story about who his first disciple was?
Was it like a dead body?
Yeah. So that was his decision. Whoever, first person I see will make my disciple. So he went to the bank of the Ganges to take his bath, and by chance he saw a dead body floating in the water, and he touched it with his feet. This immediately brought the body to life, and Thakura Sarangadas accepted him as his disciple. This disciple later became famous as Thakura Murari, and his name is always associated with that of Sri Saranga. His disciplic succession still inhabits the village of Sar. There is a temple at Mamagachi that is said to have been started by Saranga Thakura. Not long ago, a new temple, of course this is like 1974, not long ago, a new temple building was erected in front of a bakula tree there, and it is now being managed by the members of the Gaudiya Math. It is said that the management of the temple is now far better than before. In the Gorakadesha Dipika, it is stated that Saranga Thakur was formerly a gopi named Nandimukhi. Some devotees say he was formerly Prahlad Maharaj. But Sri Kavikanapur says that his father, Shivananda Sain, does not accept this proposition. So we can repeat: the 73rd branch of the original tree was Ramdasa.
73rd
branch of the original tree was Ramdasa.
The 74th was Kavichandra.
The 74th was Kavichandra.
The 75th was Sri Gopaladasa.
The 75th was Sri Gopaladasa.
The 76th was Bhagavata Acharya.
The 76th was Bhagavata Acharya.
And the 77th was Thakur Sarangadasa.
And the 77th was Thakur Sarangadasa.
Om Gyantavrandasya Janana Sakalaya Chakchunaritam Yena Tasmi Sri Deve Namaha Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shiva Sati Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 last month, on November 10th, I think it was 1974, November 10th, 1974, Srila Prabhupada completed the Srimad Bhagavatam. And there could be an entire class, which I have done, just on that incident itself. It wasn't an incident, it was an incredibly empowered marathon. Oh, I said Bhagavatam, sorry, Chaitanya, Vita. Thank you, Vita. So, I'm hoping one day that will be recorded by one of my godbrothers who were involved, Rameshwar in particular. But the Chaitanya Chaitamrita, in the Chaitanya Chaitamrita, it says that pastimes of Lord Chaitanya are like a lake filled with many beautiful lotus flowers, which are love for Krishna, Radha and Krishna. And as our acharyas tell us, the Chaitanya Chaitamrita is perhaps the most important book of the followers of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So it was very historical that Srila Prabhupada completed this translation of Chaitanya Chaitamrita, and particularly in the amount of time. Actually, there's a little correction there. The translation was done. The book, just like Krishna book, it was done, but the publication had not occurred. In the case of the Krishna book, Srila Prabhupada, through Shyamasundar, induced George Harrison to pay for the printing of the publication, because at that time, Iskcon didn't have the wherewithal to print the book, the funds required. And of course that was a very sweet pastime. And, in addition to paying for the publication, indirectly, Mr. Harrison, George, promoted this book in such a way it sold thousands and thousands, hundreds of thousands of copies. Because when people saw it, when Prabhupada accepted the financial remuneration from George, he said, would you like to write something in the foreword? And of course that beautiful foreword was there with George's signature, and people would see that, So I think George has actually out-distributed most book distributors. And even now, of course he's passed, but it still has that effect. And his chanting, because he chanted Hare Krishna, still people to this day, because George chanted, they will chant. And then just in my recent trip out, so I was down in Florida, and this lady of Indian origin comes up with her little daughter, like maybe the kid was 6 or 8 years old. And she was bringing her daughter to me and telling me, she meant the Beatles. I'm like, how would this kid know the Beatles? It's like, so I said, how do you know the Beatles? I thought maybe mom was just saying that, you know the Beatles? Yes. Okay, what's your favorite song? And she pulled out 2 of them, so there's some live stream thing going on now. I don't know if you've seen it, like 6 hours, about George Harrison, but there's, in the opening part, if anybody's interested, maybe I'll post it on NB Connect. There's numerous images and live, videos where you see in the studio with George and the Shyamasundar and Mukunda with their hands in the bean bags, And Shyamasundar commented that George is preaching beyond the grave. So, whenever Srila Prabhupada was in Jews, we would stay on the top floor of one of the tenement buildings. This was before our buildings had been constructed. Every morning, just before 6 o'clock, one of the colleagues would walk up to a So you can suspend the order of the spiritual master, but you can never neglect it. That is important instruction. It didn't compromise the principle, but it accommodated that one should always obey the instructions of the spiritual master, but it accommodated the fact that circumstances may be that one's unable to take up a particular instruction at a particular time. And then he mentioned he passed his way as a householder until 1950 when I retired from family life as a Vanaprastha. And it's interesting how he expressed that. He said, with no companion, I loitered here and there until 1958 when I took sannyas. Now, Prabhupada was hardly loitering in the sense that, at least in America, loitering means, you're just hanging around here and there, you don't have any purpose, you're just loitering about. But he was traveling during preaching. So then I was completely ready to discharge the order of my spiritual master. Previously in 1936, just before his divine grace passed away in Jagannath Puri, and of course he wrote this letter asking that, you have many disciples, and I am also one of them, but I'm a householder, grihastha, so I want to know what can I do to serve you? And in reply, dated 13th November 1936, and this was right before, 2 weeks before the passage of Srila Bhaktivedanta. He wrote a letter ordering him in the same way to preach in English the call to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, as I had heard from him. So this is also an instruction how to preach. First you have to hear nicely from the proper authority, then you speak. Then after he passed away, I started the fortnightly magazine, Back to Godhead, sometime in 1944. And I would recommend, just like yesterday Bhagavad Gita was recommending to read these books, Chaitanya Charitamrita, Bhagavatam, etc. You can find on Google the Back to Godhead magazines, the early editions. And when you read these, these are not for kids. Very high level expressions and explanations of the matter of Krishna Consciousness. He did this to spread the cult of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu through the magazine, and after he took sannyas, a well-wisher suggested that he write books instead of magazines, because he said magazines may be thrown away, but books remain perpetually. Then I attempted to write Srimad Bhagavatam, and he recounted how before that, when he was a householder, he had written the Srimad Bhagavad Gita, and he had completed about 1,100 pages, but somehow or other that manuscript was stolen. Can you imagine putting such endeavor and effort, and it's taken off your hands? But he goes on. In any case, when I published Bhagavatam, first canto in 3 volumes in India, I thought of going to the USA. By the mercy of His divine grace, I was able to come to New York on September 17th, 1965. Since then, I have translated many books, including Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, Teachings of Lord Chaitanya, a summary, and many others. And in the meantime, I was induced to translate Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita and publish it in an elaborate version. In this later time and later life, His divine grace, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur would simply read Chaitanya Charitamrita. It was his favorite book, and he used to say there would be a time when foreigners would learn the Bengali language to read the Chaitanya Charitamrita. The work on this translation began about 18 months ago. Now, by the grace of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and His divine grace, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, it is finished. In this connection, I have to thank my American disciples, especially Sriman Prajumna Das Adhikari, who he would personally call Panditji, Sriman Nitai Das Adhikari, Sriman Jayadvaita Das Brahmachari, and many other boys and girls who are sincerely helping me in writing, editing, and publishing all these Comment. He made a superhuman effort to translate these books for us, along with the illuminating purports, and it's our duty to read them. Concluding words. I think His Divine Grace, Srila Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, is always seeing my activities and guiding me within my heart by His words. As it is said in the Srimad Bhagavatam, Tene Brahma Hirdaya Adhikariye, that's 111, spiritual inspiration comes from within the heart, wherein the Supreme Personality of Godhead in His Paramatma feature is always sitting with all His devotees and associates. It is to be admitted that whatever translation work I have done is through the inspiration of my spiritual master, because personally I am most insignificant and incompetent to do this materially impossible work. I don't think myself a very learned scholar, but I have full faith in the service of my spiritual master, His Divine Grace, Srila Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. So, comment. Just imagine Srila Prabhupada translated 17 volumes in 18 months, almost one a month. From a material point of view, it was practically impossible, but he did it, as he said, with full faith on the order of his spiritual master. So there's a hint on how to do how to execute devotional service that may appear quote-unquote impossible or difficult. Full faith in the spiritual master. And he instructed us in the same spirit and parampara because he was writing books, but the disciples were lagging in their publication. He confronted his leaders in Los Angeles. I was on a morning walk, and he said, I want the remaining volumes. Maybe 2 had been printed, maybe 3, but he wanted the entire set published. And he mentioned, well, first the devotees said, yeah, they thought they could do it in maybe a couple of years. And there was the infamous, well, he said, no, that's too long. And then it came down maybe 3 or maybe 4 months. No, it can't be done, And then it was at 2 months. And that's when the infamous impossible flew out of the words, out of the mouth of the devotees. And Prabhupada just stopped and goes, impossible is a word in a fool's dictionary. And still Rameshwar wasn't convinced, so he asked the Prabhupada, what if we're not able to do it? Prabhupada replied, disqualified. In other words, if you don't do it, you're disqualified from your service. We'll look for someone else. So by Srila Prabhupada's mercy and potency, the devotees accepted the instructions and took it to heart. And they did what they had thought was impossible. Literally speaking, it was a 24/7, and the lights were never turned off. There was a whole teamwork, gave new meaning to teamwork. Even, like, say, the artist who did all these beautiful illustrations, with the exception of one person, they were all done by a team of artists. Those who were expert at landscape put in the landscape. Those who could paint rivers and waters did that. Those who could do the trees, the flowers, the shrubbery, they did that. Those who were good with the figures, the bodies, they did that. Some people were particularly good with hands. Wherever their expertise, they collaborated. And thus you don't see names on the bottoms of these paintings. The transcribers, the transliterators, they had worked in shifts. One person would work and the next person, right before it was their scheduled time, that one person would slide off, I've been told this by the ones who were involved, slide off the seat on the left side and the other one slide on the seat, was still warm, slide on the seat from the right side. Those who had children were fully cared for. Someone was with their children. Someone was doing their laundry. Someone was cooking and bringing prasadam. It didn't stop. One time when I was in LA for a Prabhupada festival, this kind of scruffy-looking fellow came up and he told me this topic was being mentioned. He says, I was part of this. And I said, you were? What did you do? And he was so happy to tell me that he was serving the artist. So when the artist might need a new paintbrush, or they ran out of, before they would run out of paint, he would scurry over to an art store and bring the required supplies. And that has been the highlight of that person's existence. So, devotees in every department, Sanskrit department, editorial department, typing department, that were working cooperatively without false ego, hardly eating or sleeping. That's how they got it done. And in the process, they became very attached to each other. It was a great, those devotees who served together at that time, and I meet them quite often, they're linked. You can never break that bond, even if they're in different countries. And always Prabhupada was in the center, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Krishna in the center. And they gave up, happily, willingly gave up personal comfort, self-interest, just for the pleasure of Srila Prabhupada, and they accomplished. So these books are not ordinary. They're Krishna and the whole parampara, and they have great potency. So concluding words of Srila Prabhupada, if there's any credit to my activities of translating, it is all due to His divine grace. Certainly, if His divine grace were physically present at this time, it would have been a very great occasion for jubilation. But even though He's not physically present, I am confident that He's very much pleased by this work of translation. He was very fond of seeing many books published to spread the Krishna Consciousness movement. Therefore, our duty, that's all of us, therefore our duty, our society, the International Society for Krishna Consciousness has been formed to execute the order of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and His Divine Grace, Srila Bhaktivedanta Saraswati. So, comment again, Srila Prabhupada returns to the order, refers to the order of the spiritual master, and how Srila Bhaktivedanta Saraswati Thakur had wanted books on Krishna consciousness to be published and distributed. And he also points out that even though his own service of writing and publishing books was in pursuance of his Guru Maharaj's orders, Iskcon as a whole is also meant to fulfill the orders of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta and Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And in particular here, Srila Prabhupada emphasizes the writing and publishing and distribution of transcendental literature. Then continued concluding words, Srila Prabhupada's words. It is my wish that the devotees of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu all over the world enjoy this translation. And I am glad to express my gratitude to the learned men in the Western countries who are so pleased with my work that they are ordering in advance all my books that will be published in the future. This process was called standing orders. And the enthusiastic book distributors, the high-level book distributors, they would go around and target institutions, libraries, even hospitals, schools, etc. And they would bring the books that were already printed and on the merit of what had been already published, induce them to commit to books in the future that had yet to be published, and they did so. So, on this occasion, therefore, I request my disciples who are determined to help me in this work to continue their cooperation fully, so that philosophers, scholars, religionists, and people in general all over the world will benefit by reading our transcendental literatures, such as Srimad Bhagavatam and Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. So comment, this order is passed on through to us, through parampara. Srila Prabhupada gave the example of a locomotive. That is, Guru Maharaj was pushing him like a train, and similarly, he was pushing us. In the future, we would push our followers, means those who come. So it's so nice now that New Vrindavan has jumped. This is one good thing from the pandemic, and that New Vrindavan has entered the fire of book distribution. Because before that, the mindset was, we're a farm, you know. We don't have to do things like distribute books. But that mindset's forever lost. So, and the way it's happening here is just so wonderful because anyone and everyone can go out and do it. I mean, busloads of people come here sometimes, so you don't even have to leave the place. And when you do leave the place, and maybe you go to Morgantown, or you go to Pittsburgh, or even any one of the small areas around, people receive the gift of Prabhupada's books very easily. We just have to try. So the final words. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purports to Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, dated November 10th, 1974, at the Bhaktivedanta Book Trust, Hare Krishna Land, Juhu, Bombay. His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. He, just one time when he was speaking one time, and he was referring to where he was Srila Bhaktisiddhanta speaking. And he said, we started this Gaudiya Math at Uttadanda Junction Road. That was the first little temple. The rent was very small. And if we would gather 2 to 250 rupees, it was very nice. What was going on? But since this has given us this marble temple, so they constructed a large temple, marble, competition between the disciples has increased, so I don't like it anymore. Rather, I would prefer take out the marble, stone, sell it, and publish some books. So, books are the basis. That's always been the backbone. And anybody can do it, actually. You know, even a fool like me. I get my case and I go. Actually, I find places like Walmart parking lots are really great, because there's always traffic there. So even up at Cabela's, that's usually where I'll go, or over to Washington, PA. And there's different ways for those who maybe don't have so much time. A few years ago, they started a book a day. So if one person just distributes one book a day, and multiple persons do one book a day, just like saving pennies, it adds up, you know. So I'm glad to see the enthusiasm that is here in Vrindavan for distributing Srila Prabhupada's books, and may it continue. And there's still time for people to, I mean, if you want to ask questions, you can, but I'd like to hear some comments and some of your experiences, either through reading Chaitanya Charitamrita or through the distribution of Srila Prabhupada's books. So open up that. Don't get too excited about this.
Maybe someone can share something from yesterday.
Yesterday.
Oh,
Okay.
all right.
Well,
Any day.
thank you so much. I was smiling because I just started the Prabhupada Charitamrita. I've been reading it, and just this morning, I'm in the part where he meets, his guru for the first time, and how he was, his friend kept saying, come, come, come. He said, no, I'm, with Gandhi and this movement, and, my father used to have sadhus come all the time, and, I'm just not interested. And he just kept and kept and kept on. And it was like, once he was there and he saw him and heard him, it was like immediate. Like, I have met, he's wonderful, wonderful person, and that was it. So it was really nice that it's right when I was reading that. So I'm really enjoying it. Thank you.
Behind you.
Thank you. I heard just part of the class because of the service. Yesterday we went to book distribution to open Srila Prabhupada's marathon for December, and we went to the university with many young people and professors also. And it was very nice to see how receptive the younger people are. Very receptive, and we distributed many books, at least 30 Bhagavad Gitas.
Wow.
Yeah.
I think they said 34, didn't they say
34, yeah.
34 this morning. I listened to those morning reports.
And I was just thinking, first I was thinking how to speak to the students, I'm not really can connect so much to younger people, but then, as you were saying about the mercy, right, I was just thinking, okay, let me just pray and whatever happens, because I find book distribution, it's extremely uncomfortable service where you cannot predict what's going to happen, and all you have just mercy of Srila Prabhupada. And you can actually see it in action. And there is also a deep realization I had afterward.
Narendra Swami, one of our GBC members, I was trying to see if I could find it, but I can't, but he posted a wonderful memory of book distribution. And most of us, when we read this, we were feeling, what a wonderful thing. So here's what they were doing, like we read the scores. Well, they were having intense competitions, this was in Europe, and enthusiastic competitions. And they would do boxes of books. What did they do with the empty boxes? They brought them back to the temple and offered them in front of Srila Prabhupada. Anyway, thought I'd share that one.
What was the other?
Yeah, I wanted to say that after a whole day of book distribution, I literally felt like, I couldn't do it myself. I didn't even know what to say. But because of the mercy of the previous acharyas and desire to serve Srila Prabhupada and my spiritual master, so everything is possible. And I didn't even know how it happened. So thank you so much for reminding me about this, about the mercy.
Hare Krishna. I'd also like to remind devotees that one of the amazing accomplishments of Srila Prabhupada was that he established BBT, Bhaktivedanta Book Trust. I think that was around 72. And what was the reason was not to promote himself at all, but to give facility so we could publish and print and distribute our own books without having to go through, non-devotee considerations, because in the first Bhagavad Gita, they didn't want to put the Sanskrit and the transliterations. So Prabhupada agreed because he wanted so badly to get this book out there. But that was an impetus for Bhagavad Gita as it is, fully done, that he established about BBT. And at one point, and it probably still remains, the BBT was the largest distributor in the world of transcendental literature from India. Publisher and distributor. And what's also amazing, when he started Bhakti Godhead 44, I mentioned this, look it up and read some of these articles. They're just very deep, very intense, and it's so blissful. It's like having a really good massage, spiritual massage. So I was going to mention that at anniversary, so like in our, in the centennial, I think it was like 2016, oh no, it was the 50th anniversary of Prabhupada's coming to America. So one of the things that, different achievements, by that point there had been several million back to Godheads distributed, in various languages all over the world. And then when you think of this, because how are they distributed? By and large, out on the street or other venues, by hand, person to person, face to face. A few years ago, one young upstart, second gen devotee, parents of Prabhupada, no, actually they're not, parents are second gen, he's offspring, but he's a really smart person and he is committed to serving Prabhupada's Iskcon. But he had this idea that the book distribution was like, who reads books anymore? Who's going to, got to figure something else out. And, really dishing on it. So actually that spurred the, this was pre-COVID, so it really spurred on the book distribution that year just to prove him wrong. No, people still do read books, Books still are valuable. Books are still the basis. But of course, however it's done, whether it's an iBook, most of the books you can get, put it on a Kindle nowadays, and it counts, as long as they read the books. Prabhupada said, if they just look at it, if they just touch it, if they just read one word, one sentence, it will benefit. And, there's so many stories about a person, they got a book, they stuck it somewhere in their family house, forgot it was even there, and then one of two things would happen. Some other family member, even a guest, would, what's this? Oh, I don't know, some guy gave it to me on the street. Wow, this really looks interesting. Can I borrow it? Yeah, sure, go on. And then that person becomes spiritually attracted to serving Krishna, just, although he wasn't the one who originally got the book, And there's a person in this community, Mother Dara, whose father got a book at an airport or somewhere, I thought it was an airport, whatever, but it was a Krishna book. And he sees he wasn't paying attention, just for some reason he got it. He sees her picture, so when he came home, he opens her door and throws, here's something for you. Well, that was the end of his daughter, in the traditional sense, because it kindled an awakening in her heart. She was just, a young person at the time, maybe 12 years old. You don't know when the seed will fructify. How do you know? No, behind you. Hello, turn around.
Thank you for sharing this story. In this regard, I just remembered one story what happened. I was going home in New York in subway one day, and then I see someone is reading at like 9 p.m. at night, and then I see someone is reading Bhakti Yoga book across with me, and I'm like, And he doesn't look like a devotee, he's with the luggage. I used to live next to the airport, and then I'm like, okay, I'm not gonna pay attention, whatever, he got it from somewhere. But then I decided to ask him. So I asked him, like, where did you get this book? And he's like, oh, this book? My ex-girlfriend, she got it, somebody gave her on the street, and I just reading it. And now, and I'm going to Israel, and, I was thinking I could read it in the plane. And then gave him another book, and he was very open to take it, even though he was different faith, like Jewish faith. He was very open, and these situations happen. Thank you.
Divine Grace to Prabhupada ki jai, Vrajra Srimad Chaitanya Chaitamitra ki jai, Srila Prabhupada's family business, book distribution, reading, studying ki jai.
Grace Malati Devī Dāsī ki jai.